Today we are with
Luca.
So Luca, first of all, I want to thank you that you're here right now today and you joined us. So thank you
for having me.
And I will just dive in it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So introduce yourself to us, to the audience.
So hello, I'm Luca Dombetzki. I've been with TUM.AI a lot and have now pivoted to starting my own startup. And in terms of journey that I've been through, so that you can place me a little bit, I've come from the informatics bachelor background and did finance and information management. But basically all along I did AI things. And finally, I loved bringing AI to people because back then it was a niche topic. And so I helped people start TUM.AI, and that's been blowing up. And then after my master's finished, we found the idea and started the startup, and now I'm here.
Sounds cool. So how are you besides your startup and everything in life?
Yeah, no, it's been nice. I was with the introduction of the AI E-Lab, which was quite cool, seeing some new people going in the next iteration. Otherwise, yeah, weather is quite warm right now.
Yeah.
But nothing bad, so I'm fine. How about you?
So I'm good as well. I'm trying to live my life and stuff.
Nice.
With my studies. Overall good. So how was the journey to start a startup?
So I've never really been into entrepreneurship actually.
Yeah.
I was more the big corporate guy. I've started working for a corporate since the second semester of my bachelor's. And so it was more like a journey of like, hey, this is cool, I want to do things. And I was always like connected to why we're doing it, try to get closer to the user. And at some point during my master's, I started an internship where they transferred me then to a startup. And that was my first like introduction to the whole startup world. And it blew me away. It was like all of the bullshit got removed. You just focus on what you actually do with people, really try to build something that actually matters. And every time that doesn't work, well, it's on you and you need to go back and fix it. And I really liked that atmosphere, that attitude, no like large hierarchies of moving things. So everything in corporate is typically very slow. And so after my master's, I was very much looking for joining startups or going in the whole ecosystem. I didn't really plan on founding something. That whole thing happened because we were confronted with the problem a lot after our masters and also during TUM.AI. So we're doing something in recruiting. And after the masters, I was obviously applying for positions. So did one of my co-founders. And at the same time, I was running recruiting for TUM.AI since the very beginning, which turned into a bigger and bigger and bigger problem because you have more and more people applying. And the interesting thing was that for both sides, it's shit. So like for the talent, for the company, nobody's having fun with it. And
I'm going to interrupt you a bit.
Yes.
When I receive those emails where they say, we are so sorry that we need to reject you and stuff, seems like they're having fun, but I'm not having fun.
Those are typically automated, also because you can get in a lot of legal trouble if you don't automate them, which is also fun. But yeah, so the whole situation was bad, and we've also in the startups that all three of us have been in handled a bit of recruiting. And so with all of the AI craze starting to happen, that was like before ChatGPT, that was like GPT-3 alpha times. We were like, there's something there. We don't know what is there, but recruiting is utterly broken and we want to check it out. And that's when we started working on it. We were still working part-time then for other jobs, but we really wanted to look into it if there's something. And that's how we started.
Sounds really cool. But as I know that other entrepreneurs started their journey when they were so little and they always try to find things new, build things. They were not good at school and stuff, but you were also good at school and also social activities. You were a part of a student initiative, so that's a huge social activity for me. And then when they were working, other entrepreneurs, when they were working at the firms, they didn't think that they belonged there. Do you have any of those things that pop up that may be a part of your entrepreneur spirit?
I think anyone can become an entrepreneur because in the end it's just about finding a problem that you're passionate about and doing something about it. However, like this, I had for a long time that I always wanted to do something about it, and everybody that tried to block me, I somehow went around it. But that meant that I typically had fun with it. I never optimized for like the big fame or business or whatever, but rather had fun during my life. And also the TUM.AI initiative, it was amazing when I heard of this WhatsApp group that basically existed. And so when I came in, we threw the first hackathon together with OpenAI, and it was like it blew up immediately. And that was not because we wanted to be big or because we wanted to reach a lot of people. It was rather because we cared a lot about AI and we brought it to a lot of people. And the same is now with the startup. It's not about us being super famous with what we do. It's rather about how can we help people? How can we do something that brings joy to people and help them in their lives? And I think anybody can do that as soon as they find something they're passionate about.
Can you explain what you do in your startup a bit more in the detail?
So I think there's like two ways to look at it. One is the business, one is what it does for you. So essentially, we're a recruiting platform.
Yeah.
So for you can imagine that kind of like ChatGPT being the base for you to find your next job. So you can really be authentic, you can present yourself, you can talk about what you want, what you also don't like. And we use that to automatically give you straight up relevant positions, and we help you also fit to them. And instead of you applying or something, the same happens on the other side with the team lead, which means that we can build a great connection between you two, and you can basically jump straight into an interview.
So we can imagine your startup as a communication channel between the job and the people who are willing to apply to that job.
Exactly. We're trying to find the quickest and most authentic connection between team leads and talents. That's exactly it. And the interesting thing about the business side, and that's also why we're a platform in the end, is because when we looked into recruiting and why it is broken, we actually found out that, well, a lot of the way that you do recruiting right now was limited by technologies, was limited by why we did recruiting in the first place, which ended up being a lot of titles and keywords and everything. And we realized that the actual good things that you can build great connections on, that headhunters use, that agencies use, are all the squishy bits. So they call you up and ask you what you want. And now with AI, that was the first time that you could do that, because AI can understand this, can also ask questions and so on. So like we could start crafting this new process. And the big problem was that there is no data. There's no data on you online about what you want, care about, what your next step you would like to have. And also the team leads, they typically just dump it somehow in a template for a job ad. And that also then gets lost in information, and you just come up with requirements that maybe don't matter in the end. So we started trying to get this very raw data. That's one part of the business. And the other thing is, because it's automated, because it's with AI in the end, we lose a lot of the inflexibilities that agencies or headhunters have, because they can only have that many clients, that many talents, and they typically get all of their market knowledge by being like super in a niche. So if you want to have some tech talent in AI and so on, there's probably a talent pool out there somewhere that's like super niche, kind of like TUM.AI as well. Or companies have to start working with agencies that can provide those talents. And that's the other thing about our business, where we can break those barriers and basically give you the option to find whatever actually fits best to you, no matter how different your interests are. We pride ourselves in finding something that fits all of them or fits what you want to do.
I was going to ask you about the data and how you go around with data when it comes to privacy, and is your company keeping up the data, or when it's done with the client and the team lead, it gets all like deleted or something like that? So how do you guys go around with data, and did you have any difficulties in that area? As you told, the data finding was a bit difficult for you in the beginning.
If you want to look at us that way, then we are in essence also a data collection company, because we need to get this, what you care about and what the team lead cares about. It's not as fleeting as you think, because a team lead typically hires multiple positions. So while the unique details for that particular role might not be relevant anymore, the general gist is still relevant, and we can use it to bootstrap the next role that the team lead is hiring for. And on the other hand, for the talents, you're also probably going to join into another job. However, we are GDPR compliant, which means, and that's also a big thing that companies care about actually, because no other company is doing that apart from the very big ones, that the laws that are written there. For example, when you want to delete your account, that all of your data is deleted. We can follow that. Since we built the whole company basically on existing models and started in the beginning kind of saying like models are going to improve, we need to find the spaces in between the models and try to build a great user experience around it and not worry about like training the next best model. We also don't have this typical training issue that you have with data that somehow you need to then remove that checkpoint that you had the data in and so on. So since we're not using the direct data for training anything, but rather the paths that the people take, the connections or what happened during a connection that made it great and so on, yeah, we can comply fully. And if you want to delete your data, you can delete it again. Of course, we can learn a lot about your path. We can help you a lot.
So what's your business model?
So on the whole model basically consists on out of the costs and how we earn money. And while the costs are for the whole industry pretty low because it's fully automated and we don't have those variable costs of having to support a talent in person. The getting people to pay for it is the tricky part. And there, since we are a platform, we're not actually selling our software, but we're rather selling the service. So this is typically called software as a service. So the talents don't pay anything, but rather the companies are responsible for paying for it. And also there we have a kind of unique position to anybody else in the market because we're targeting the team lead. Anybody else is targeting the recruiters or the company itself. And so this is on one hand a challenge, on the other hand a great opportunity for us to like go with the team lead and have them basically pay for whoever they're getting into the company.
So let's talk about the market a bit. Was it hard for you to go from a technical job to be in the market and to experience it the first hand? How was it? How did you adjust? Or did you have any difficulties when it comes to money, handling money and stuff?
We're still adjusting. We are in the market entry right now, which means we're selling to the first people. The whole startup space is very different from the typical technical perspective, which we can talk about in a second. The interesting thing in founding something, especially if you're students that don't have a lot of money, finishing your master and before your first job, jumping straight in, we got supported by grants. That was a pain to get. It's getting better now, but Germany is supporting us with a few grants so that we basically have now essentially a year to build what we want to build. And through that year and what we're building and the idea that we had, we get more and more connections towards people that can help us out, can get us more money to keep building it. And now when we successfully enter the market, we should also have some revenue to spend on it. But the thinking is a completely different one because you need to go away from your solution and you need to go really into what is the problem and how you can basically help with the problem in the smallest possible way. And since we're not recruiting experts, that was kind of the most interesting part because we took almost a year to understand the market, to dive deep into it, to talk with tons of people, recruiters, agencies, team leads, talents, and so on, to really understand what is smoke and what is fire, what of the recruiting problems actually are the big problems. And when we then arrived at the team lead, and basically that in the complex world today where you really want to make a quality hire, that's really hard to do. That's when we found the problem and then could start working on a solution, try to do some tests and so on. It's also amazing because I'm having two co-founders that are obviously better in that side of things. So I'm having one co-founder who studied with me in my master's, which was finance information management. So he has the business side completely under control, knows all about numbers and has a super strong determinism to just get through every problem. He's also doing like professional mountain biking on the side and everything. He's a crazy person.
Wow.
But so he's taking care a lot about this, getting to the next step, not from a product or technical perspective, but rather from like a market perspective. Yeah. And then you have my third co-founder who studied UX design and has been doing a lot of product in other startups, has also been actually the head of design once of TUM.ai. You might know Ramona, I don't know. She's my sister. So you can also find her probably now on LinkedIn. But the point is that she has a lot of user experience done in her life, which means that trying to understand the team lead, trying to understand their problem without knowing what exactly the solution should be is a super challenging task because nobody can tell you what the next recruiting solution is. So she is extremely valuable in just doing a lot of tests, trying to figure that out, building the next product vision, talking a lot with me to understand what can be done and what next thing can we build and so on. So that's kind of how we balance from just tech can do a lot to actually now building something that we can enter the market with.
It sounds cool though, because when you're a person who just started to get to know this area, you have to have someone be by your side, work with you.
Strong support systems,
Yeah, it sounds cool. So you said 1 year of thinking how you guys want to enter the market and what you want to do. So for how many years were you thinking about this idea?
So we started, when was that? End of, like basically 1.5 years ago, to just have this idea of like AI can do a lot with recruiting. In 1 week we got it into a version to just like say like, hey, this could help. Pitched it in front of people. They said you need to do this, and so we started looking into it. And then there was this whole journey of different support programs, different grants that we applied for, trying to understand what exactly the problem is. And that took roughly a year. And that's also the time which we will probably get into later, where we joined the AI E-Lab. And during the AI E-Lab, we found then our problem. Then we started building the solution, got a few grants, and since February now, we're full-time. So basically, we started full-time in February, and since then we've been building things, talking to people, showing it to people, and now starting to sell it.
What was your hardest experience throughout those 1.5 years? What was the hardest thing to handle for you?
I think there's two things. One on the business side or on the whole startup side, and one in technical perspective. The whole startup is a huge challenge if you do it the first time. If you guys know some people that are serial founders, having a serial founder on board makes a lot of things easier, because you're basically trying to figure out how to build a business while building a business, which is super stressful. So the whole team dynamics, the support system, I think I've never spent so much time with Sebi and Ramona, just trying to understand what the fuck we need to do. So all of that part is super, super difficult. And it still is. We're still questioning constantly, like, is this the right way of building a business? And the other thing on the technical side is typically when every technical problem I touched, it is like, hey, this is what we need to achieve. This is measurable, what we want to achieve. Let's go and do that. And then it's just about using the tech in some way to actually do that. It might be super complex, but it's always very definitively working in the end. And in recruiting, where we found that the biggest problem is quality, that's really hard to measure, if impossible. So building some technical solution for something that is not measurable is really, really hard. So on one hand, you try to make up things that you measure and just go step by step and just see what works. And the other thing, and that's what we optimize now really, is just to build the things that can be shown the quickest. So basically the time until we show something to somebody to see if it got better is what we optimize for. So even now I'm building in the backend a lot of things that helps Ramona just tweak things for the next test so that she can directly iterate with the team lead, for example, instead of us having to go back and provide some super complex technical solution, because a lot of the things that we need to build, we don't even know yet. Yeah. So that's really hard for technical teams to work without something that can be measured.
But when it comes to startups, you learn with experience. So you learn with time, you adjust with time, and you go maybe through hard times, but those times will teach you something.
Yeah.
So how did you three come together that you want to build a startup?
So Sebi and I, we were both up for jobs, finishing our master thesis, going bouldering a lot together. And he was that guy that always had just like ideas of like, could AI do this? Could AI do that? And I was the AI guy in the room. I could say yes or no. And so we had a lot of conversations of just like where AI would go. We actually had like really weirdly the idea for Bing Chat back then, kind of like since Codex came out or something, it can crawl the internet and then you can provide personalized answers and so on. But that's very hard to build, so we skipped it immediately. And that kind of came together with all of the troubles that we saw in recruiting and also our own struggles. I literally built like a ChatGPT back then for me to help me motivate for applying, because I didn't even know why I was doing that at that point, because it's just, very annoying to apply for jobs. And so that kind of like got us into the idea. And Sebi and I then were like, okay, let's just look into this a bit more because it's interesting. And we very quickly realized that like he comes from electrical engineering and business. He has a way bigger business focus than me. So it made sense for us to team up. But we are both not the strongest in terms of experience with people, with design, with user experience and so on. And well, I know my sister, so that was very easy to, I think after 1 week she joined us and she got really hyped for it because from her perspective, it's a really interesting problem because it's a people problem and it's a user experience problem. So she's basically playing a star role and trying to figure out what we need to build. And that's how we got started.
Yeah. So let's go into the technical side a bit. And what are the technical struggles that you've been through, and what was the hardest thing to code or to figure out when it comes to technical side?
So I already said the measurability,
yeah,
everything hard, but that's not the hardest thing that we had to build. I think the hardest thing for, especially in AI, building an AI business, is you have everything of the tech stack. So nothing individually is hard. You cannot just hire somebody or like do it yourself, that you just sit down with AI for like a month and really figure out some really complicated thing. But rather the AI needs to work very well with the data, needs to work well with the backend, needs to work well with the front end. And so you need to, in a matter of no time, become kind of like an expert in everything to quickly build a thing that you can show to people. Because every MVP that we tried, every mock-up that we tried didn't really work because people need to experience it themselves. So that kind of was the biggest challenge on how you can integrate the whole tech stack in AI very quickly and without having to code for like a year, a big application.
Yeah. So not everybody is a tech guy like you. So can you tell us about technical details, but so that every non-technical people can understand
what we're doing? And okay. So essentially, the front end is user-facing on both sides, is something like ChatGPT. It literally also uses technologies like that in the backend. Means that we basically have a ChatGPT that knows everything about the job market, knows everything about the other side, knows the best practices, can interact with you, and then the user interface, of course, is also responsible for showing you results, getting you deeper into it, and so on. And that's where basically the second big part comes in. So one is the front-end ChatGPT and so on experience, and one is the big matching engine, essentially. So somehow we need to use this super unstructured qualitative data that you just entered and bring it together with someone on their side, some team lead that also looked for someone energetic or whatever. And we need to bring that together, which in the beginning were just very simple embedding models, which means you just dump the whole data into like huge vectors and try to calculate something. But essentially you can think about it in two big parts. One is the matching of both sides, and one is the front end where it's very similar to ChatGPT.
So how do you do the calculations with the data that you have? Because you have like personal data, personal things. Oh, I am really motivated to work on this field. So how do you do those calculations?
So part of it is, of course, a little bit secret. But on the other hand, the biggest challenge that we kind of solved, keeping that alive, because every other approach, so if you look at LinkedIn or if you look at Indeed or something, they use keywords and filters and everything. So the thing that we do is we keep all of those nuances and all of those semantics alive, which means that we have a whole swath of AI models in the background that basically compare your raw data with other raw data. We have some, of course, more abstract representations to make things quicker, but that's essentially it. A lot of AI is working to really understand how people fit together. And because we can keep those nuances alive, it works. Because you don't have to do this random double guessing game anymore, where you need to write down the skill that you think that they want to see, and they write down the skill that they think that you have. But instead, you can both just talk about what you're excited about or what you're doing, what you are, who you are, and the AI does all the figuring out in between, trying to see if this can work together or not.
So before you said that you joined AI E-Lab.
Exactly.
So how was your experience there? Did it help you when it comes to handling a business and being an entrepreneur? It's your first time, so...
So back then, the AI Lab was a year into our journey. So we knew a lot about how to start a startup. We had very little experience in doing so, but we also knew a lot already about our market. So compared to other teams that joined, we were quite far in the way that we knew a lot already. But we were at the same point of trying to figure out how the hell to go to the next step. And that's where AI E-Lab helped us a lot. It was the first iteration. It was just a room full of really cool people. So they could challenge us, we could challenge them, we could understand what we learned in terms of building a business that is actually true. And on the other hand, they could challenge a few things that we were not thinking about. And that kind of brought us into like fixing up the problem, knowing what it is, going into the solution space. And during the AI E-Lab time, we also then got our grants. And so we left the AI E-Lab extremely happy. We took part in the final pitch competition, people saw us. And since then, we've not stopped running, basically. So it was kind of like a kickoff, if you want.
Yeah, so how was the pitch event?
That was amazing. It was like a lot of people that joined to see the startups. It was also 6 of the, I think 14 startups that were initially there that were selected. And the interesting thing is like, no matter how far the people were, there was a whole mix in those teams. So some really had the idea at the beginning of the AI E-Lab and then went to have an amazing pitch about, with a prototype, first results that they had during the time with AI E-Lab. And so like 6 amazing teams pitching.
Okay, so what makes AI E-Lab different from other events?
So we've been actually in a few incubators now, or like we've been in one incubator before AI E-Lab and one program which is EVOR afterwards. And the one before was Explore, which was more trying to teach you the entrepreneurial spirit when you come out of TUM, which was not very useful to us because the timing was off. We already had that spirit. We more needed to understand what we need to build. And the AI E-Lab came in extremely amazingly as like a big sandbox that we could play in to just see what happens, as well as, cool people, a cool community. Lots of the startups are still involved. And the big problem, especially in Munich, is that the ecosystem was very small. And since the AI E-Lab, that just started opening doors because TUM.ai from the very beginning has brought like different ecosystems together. And so I would say that that is like super unique about the AI E-Lab. And since it's not for equity, you can join it, play around with it, and then afterwards go where you start your journey off then with equity or with a full team and so on.
So I want to jump back to questions about your startup. So you mentioned things about ChatGPT. Do you think that ChatGPT will block your path to the success? Or you think that you have the matching system and it differs from ChatGPT because it doesn't have any matching system?
So the thing again is the data, which ChatGPT also, like, it would need to be built for gathering the data, which is a lot of the best practices of recruiting. But yeah, it's the whole thing coming together essentially. And ChatGPT is a huge enabler for us. The competition is rather on who right now owns the team leads and talents. For example, with LinkedIn, they have a very bad solution for recruiting, but they know a lot of the people. So if they build a better solution, they could become a competitor. Or there's all of the agencies and the headhunters who do it right now manually. So those are the ones that we have to fight for the deal. So a team lead typically talks to an agency right now, and we need to come in there and say like, hey, use this tool and get a person through the tool instead of some human you've been talking and get annoyed by. And so that's kind of like the big competitors that we have instead of ChatGPT itself. It's rather that, the whole technology like always boosted us. GPT-3 and those models came out that enabled our idea. Then ChatGPT came out, which made our front end way easier to build because we were building it anyways. And now we just didn't have to build a lot of it. And embedding models improved right when we needed it to. So I hope that's going to continue so we can focus really on fixing recruiting instead of having to worry about the AI models themselves.
So do you have any Instagram accounts or web pages about your company so that people can get information about it?
So we launched last week effectively. Right now we're building all of that up, so you can find us as Ikigai on LinkedIn as get-ikigai. There's also going to be a domain soon, probably get-ikigai.com. And otherwise, you can just connect with me on LinkedIn, and you're going to hear about what I do anyways. Yeah, and that was all, I guess. And thank you for coming. You're very welcome. And thank you for having me. The conversation was super great with you. And that's all. Don't forget to follow our Instagram, LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube accounts. We'll see you soon there.